Now, I love vinyl records, but I also really love movies, and so I figured, why not make a video dedicated to the movie and TV soundtracks that I own on vinyl? Welcome back to the channel. Now, in today's video, I want to talk all about movie and TV soundtracks and scores on vinyl. Music is such a big part of the emotional ties that we have to movies and television shows, and so it's really fun to be able to sit down and throw on a vinyl record and be able to revisit these movies and TV show memories that we have through the music. All right, so the first album that I'm going to talk about here is the one right over my shoulder, which is the soundtrack to the animated movie An American Tail. This is a Steven Spielberg produced film. It is a Don Bluth film. If you love animation, you're probably familiar with Don Bluth. For a short time, he really went head to head with Disney and really gave them a run for their money. Now, the music in this movie really does stay with you. I haven't probably seen An American Tail in maybe 25 years, and yet I still remember the song There's No Cats in America, and I still love listening to the duet between Linda Ronstadt and James Ingram singing the song Somewhere Out There. It's an amazing song, really great performances by these two excellent singers, and that alone, at least for me, is worth the purchase of this particular record. Alright, so next up is the soundtrack for the movie Aladdin. Really sticking with the animated theme, aren't we? This particular album is a picture disc record. Now, the interesting story with this particular album is that this was one of the first albums in terms of soundtracks that I purchased. And I purchased it on picture disc record because, well, I really didn't know any better. I probably purchased this maybe 10 years ago. I don't know, maybe even 11 years ago. I don't really know when it came out, but it feels like it was a good decade ago, and it was when I had a lot less knowledge about the vinyl hobby and the fact that picture disc records really are for aesthetics and not for sound. I have put this actual album on the turntable, and while it looks good spinning around because it has nice colors and the actual artwork is quite nice, it doesn't particularly sound all that great. So if I were to purchase Aladdin again on vinyl, it would be a traditional black vinyl. Maybe it would be colored vinyl because I think that is really fun, but it certainly wouldn't be a picture disc record. All right, so next up, as you can see, is The Lion King. Once again, another picture disc record that looks fantastic. Love the colors, I love the artwork, and while I love the movie, I love it just as much as I love the Aladdin movie, and I think the music is equally great. If I were to purchase it on vinyl again, probably be black vinyl, colored vinyl. I wouldn't purchase a picture disc record, but it is nice to have. It is kind of cool if I were to maybe display it on the shelf or maybe in some sort of a record frame that I could put on the wall, but in terms of functionality of playing it on a turntable and enjoying it for the sound, I don't think so. Now, this is the music for the movie Batman Returns. So this is the Tim Burton Batman, this is the Michael Keaton Batman, and that means that this is the Danny Elfman score. I always loved the Tim Burton Batman movies growing up. Michael Keaton is my Batman, was my Batman, will always be my Batman, and it's always fun to be able to kind of relive those memories through the amazing score by Danny Elfman. Oh, and Michelle Pfeiffer. Michelle Pfeiffer killed it as Catwoman. All right, so up next is the motion picture soundtrack for the movie The Bodyguard, starring Whitney Houston and Kevin Costner. Now, this is a soundtrack that has some really great music on it and some really great artists. Now, of course, if you're purchasing this album, then it's probably because you really want to hear Whitney Houston's performance with I Will Always Love You. But this album also has songs by Kenny G and Lisa Stansfield and Joe Cocker, so it's really a mix of different artists from various different genres as well. Now, Whitney Houston has about 5 or so different songs on this particular soundtrack, and her performance is, of course, always dynamite. But oddly enough, for whatever reason, I've never seen the movie. I don't even know why. I'd actually be kind of curious though. Do you own any movie or TV soundtracks that for whatever reason you love the music but have never seen the movie? Drop me a line in the comment below. I'd love to know. Alright, so next up is the soundtrack for Breaking Bad. This is music by Dave Porter. The television show is, well, one of the greatest dramas to ever hit the small screen. If you've never watched it, you are missing out. You should really try to rectify that as soon as possible. Maybe you can rectify that faster than I can rectify my inability to have ever seen The Bodyguard. All right, so now next up is the motion picture soundtrack for the movie The Dark Knight, directed by Christopher Nolan, and of course had that iconic performance by Heath Ledger as the Joker. You really realize how great of a job composer Hans Zimmer did at bringing out the chaos and the intensity and bringing that to Gotham City and helping that really enhance the performances of, characters like Two-Face and the Joker. His music was really able to help keep you on edge as an audience member in the theater, and so I actually find that when I'm sitting down to listen to the soundtrack for The Dark Knight that in many ways it's almost too intense out of context when you're not actually watching the whole film. It has a lot of chaotic and at times dark energy to it, which really worked very well for characters like the Joker and the Gotham City that Batman was trying to maneuver in. Alright, so up next is the Broadway cast album for the stage play Dreamgirls. Now, I saw the film Dreamgirls way back in 2006 when it came out, and I really liked the music. But the music never came to vinyl, only streaming and CD. So the next best thing to me was to find the actual cast album that was on vinyl from the original Broadway play. And what's actually kind of fun about this is I'm able to spot some of the similarities and the differences between what was done on Broadway and what was eventually done on the big screen. It's also pretty cool to be able to see the differences between how different performers perform different songs. So I'm able to appreciate on one hand how Jennifer Hudson did her performances for the movie soundtrack, and I'm able to appreciate also how Jennifer Holliday performed some of her songs on this particular album. Alright, so next up is the original soundtrack for the movie Grease. Now, I've always loved this movie and I've always loved the music. The only regret that I have is that I need to upgrade the actual album because the condition of the record is one that I purchased way back in the day where I didn't really know what I was doing. Now, the story of this particular album is that I actually purchased this album from a 99-cent bin probably back in 2013 or 2014. And it was way back in the day where I was really just excited to get brand new vinyl records, and I didn't even know anything about the vinyl grading system. So I wasn't really checking for any type of scratches, or I really wasn't investigating the surface of the record. And I just kind of looked at the album, said I love the movie and I love the music and I'll take it. And for whatever reason, I've never actually taken the steps to upgrade to a better copy of this actual album. So I still have this original one that I purchased back in the day that is not in the greatest of condition, but it still stands as a testament to my love of the movie and my love of the music as well. Alright, so up next is the motion picture soundtrack for the movie Home Alone. Now, this album is one that I purchased directly from Mondo on their website many years ago, and it's really cool because the vinyl comes on both red and green colored vinyl records. Now, the composer of Home Alone is the great John Williams, and he's done amazing scores for Star Wars and Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park and E.T., but I would submit that the most underrated score, the most underrated work that John Williams has done is for Home Alone. I think that John Williams' music in that movie is so sweet and heartwarming, and I really shudder to think what that movie would be like if we had a far less talented composer at the wheel to bring that movie to life. Alright, now up next is the original soundtrack for the movie Jurassic Park. Now, this is another movie that John Williams composed the music for, and while this was an amazing movie in its own right and really springboarded Hollywood to another level, especially when it comes to visual effects, it was John Williams' music, in my opinion, that really made this movie all the more memorable. Alright, so if you were a Marvel fan about 10 years ago, and you also had a Netflix subscription about 10 years ago, then there's a good chance that you were watching television shows like Daredevil and Jessica Jones and Luke Cage. And so that's what I have right here, the original soundtrack for the Netflix series Luke Cage. And while I really did like the show Luke Cage, and I loved the setting in Harlem, and I enjoyed the characters, I thought one of the things that really stood out, in some ways as a character in its own right, was the music. Now, funny enough, this is also another Mondo release that I purchased on Mondo's website. And at this point, I've said this so many times, I think Mondo needs to cut me a check. I'm just saying. And out of all of the movie and TV show soundtracks that I have on vinyl, I think that this one and the one for Jurassic Park are probably tied for the covers that I really love the most. Alright, so up next is the original soundtrack for the 1990 movie, The Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Kind of. In fact, out of all of the records that I've shown you when it comes to movie soundtracks, this one is the most unique, because this album was made by Shapeshift Records, and it's not the typical soundtrack album that you would come to expect. This vinyl record tries to imagine an alternate universe where the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle movie was released as a video game as well, and you were able to get the soundtrack from the video game on vinyl. And what that means is that all of the music that you remember from the movie kind of gets an 80s to 90s video game sound makeover. So the music has a lot more synths to it, and overall will kind of give you an idea of what it would have been like if that movie's music had a bit of a video game aesthetic laid on top of it. I think it ultimately works really well, and I know that they've done it with other movies that came out in and around that same time, like Ghostbusters and the original Tim Burton Batman movie. Woo! Wow. It's a long video. Alright, so up next is the original soundtrack to the Netflix series Stranger Things. The show Stranger Things always had a really moody and synth-based soundtrack, so that's really up my alley as somebody that likes old school movies and old school sound and even synthwave music. And since we all know it takes absolutely forever for a new season of Stranger Things to come out on Netflix, I might as well throw on the record from time to time and go back down memory lane. Alright, so next up is not a television show, not a movie, it's a video game. The Streets of Rage video game that I remember playing way back in the day on Sega Genesis has finally made its way into my vinyl collection by way of the soundtrack that they released on vinyl. And so it's really fun to be able to throw a vinyl record like this onto the turntable and get those flood of memories coming back, holding a controller in your hands on a nice warm summer day when you had nothing to do besides play video games, have fun, and enjoy your childhood. I kind of wish I had even more video game soundtracks from video games that I loved back in the day on vinyl, but for now, this will definitely satisfy my appetite. Alright, so up next is the original soundtrack for the motion picture The Wiz. Now, The Wiz starred Diana Ross and Michael Jackson and even had Richard Pryor in the film. And of course, it has great music in it like You Can't Win and No Bad News and Ease on Down the Road. And while it's still kind of funny that Diana Ross, who is looking damn near 40 years old in this movie, is playing Dorothy, and it's not Stephanie Mills who played her on stage, it's still a great movie with really great music, and I even have the Broadway cast album on vinyl as well. And that's an album that I originally had and listened to on cassette tape when I was very, very young. And so this whole situation with me having the original soundtrack for the motion picture on vinyl, it really just seems that when it comes to The Wiz, everything has kind of come full circle for me. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, put the words soundtrack in the comments section below. And also, let me know your thoughts when it comes to movies and TV show soundtracks on vinyl. Is that something that you collect? And if so, let me know one or two of your favorite albums that you own. So that's about it, guys. Hopefully you have enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit the like button down below. I always appreciate it when you do that. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button as well if you want to be alerted whenever a new video drops. Thank you again for watching. I will see you in the next video, and as always, stay devoted to vinyl.